Okay, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where in the world you're joining us today. My name is Mike Lennon. On behalf of Security Week, I'll be the moderator of today's webinar. Today's webinar, we're proud to have done by RSA on the topic of evolution from two-factor authentication to identity assurance. A couple quick logistics items before we get started. Many people ask if the webinar will be recorded. It certainly will, and it will be available on demand actually just within probably minutes after the conclusion of today's program. So we'll also be sending out a link to watch that on demand if you want to watch again and share with any colleagues. Additionally, you'll see some resources and links located next to the main window. Feel free to click on those. Our presenter is going to mention some of those, and they might be a good resource for you after. Additionally, this is designed to be interactive, so you will notice a Q&A tab in your Un24 player. Please interact with us, type in your questions throughout the presentations, and we will be holding Q&A toward the end. So we have about 15 minutes reserved for questions and answers toward the end, but feel free to submit them during the presentation. Any other logistics? I think we are good on that. So for the sake of time, I'm going to get right into it. Today's presenter, we have Jim Mandelbaum. He's Field CTO for Identity at RSA, and he's worked in this industry for a long time. He's provided guidance to organizations on methods to build out a secure access and identity plan. And he's a standing member of the High Tech Criminal Investigations Association and volunteers with the Police Investigations into High Crimes. Could go on and on about Jim's experience in this field, but I'll let him kind of show some of that through the presentation. So Jim, I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball over to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mike. Hello, everybody. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just get right into it and start with what's most important. Whoops. Screen advanced a little too fast for me. Sorry about that. Where we're going to talk specifically around identity. So one of the first things you're going to see in the attachments available to you is the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report. And that report really does get to the really granular view into what's going on in the breaches in the world. And one of the statistics that's really eye-opening to everybody is where they know the source of a breach. 81% of them involved the identity. It involves a weak, default, or stolen password. What's worse than that is how they're getting that information, and it's coming from web having a hard time this morning. Web attacks from web interfaces. So what that means is as we move into web-based applications and web-based services, of course we know that that is becoming a very vulnerable point. The other side of this is we're all reading about point-of-sale attacks, and we're all reading about how all these breaches are occurring. We can look into the large retail breach. We can look actually into most of the retail breaches, and what's coming through on those is partner access. So all of these, all have in common is, of course, the identity. And that Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, I encourage you to read it. I think you're going to find some really interesting things around it. The second thing that's important to note is everybody always thinks it's the bad guys that are doing it. Maybe so, but 25% of the breaches last year that they know the source involved inside attacks. So that's something that's important. But again, 81%. So if I'm a bad guy, am I going to spend my time on malware? Well, 51% did, but the majority of them were delivering malware to do phishing and steal those identities or do command and control of a machine. So it's kind of interesting when you start looking at that. So what I'd like to ask is we're going to go ahead and do a poll. And the question really is about, have you ever sent work outside the workplace to your personal email so you can get things done to circumvent your security measures? Or because of password changes, have you ever done things like password 1, password 2, password 3 as it changes? I'm kind of curious to see how many people have. And Mike, I'm going to let you take care of that.
Okay, yeah, you should see a poll on your screen. Go ahead and click, and then about 15, 20 seconds from now, we'll go ahead and share the results live for everybody to see.
Curious to see how many people are going to be honest.
Okay, drums please, and here we go.
Okay. So if we combine the top three, we're probably about 70%. That's the norm. 70 to 80% is the norm. I would say the people that say they haven't done either, okay. I think some people may be kidding themselves, but okay. The reality is we do that. And why do we do that? Well, part of the problem is that there is this tug of war. There's the tug of war that says, I'm a user, I need to do my job, and security is getting in the way of me doing my job. I want to be able to get access to every resource. I want to be able to get it whether I'm on the network, off the network. I want to be able to get it from my mobile devices, my tablets, my phone, whatever mechanism I want to use, just let me do it. And we all can identify with that as our user side. But from our security side, we say, whoa, whoa, whoa. I've got to get control of this. I've got to get visibility into what you're doing. I've got to have accountability. And I've got to really lock this down because I have compliance problems. I've got these auditors breathing down my back that say you can't do that. So we have this complete tug of war that we got to deal with. So the simplest way that we dealt with it was we used two-factor. And two-factor, when we think about it, it's something you know, something you have. The traditional authenticators, the fobs, the Windows desktops, the mobile soft tokens, SMS, a phone call, or an email. These are the authenticators we all have known. And I won't say we know and love because quite a bit of us actually don't like them because of the user experience. And that's why users are circumventing. So we're going to have one more poll real quick. And the poll is basically asking you, how many of you today are using these authenticators for access to some kind of service on your network? VPN, web apps. I'm kind of curious how many of you are currently using these methods. And Mike should have the poll up for you.
Yeah, it should be showing. Go ahead and submit your answer. Yes, no, or yes, but we are also using some of the newer authentication methods too. 15 seconds to go. Okay, and the results are in. Let's go ahead and push them live. Here we go.
All right. So the yeses, that's probably about what I expected. I expected about 60%, and that's right on the money. The no's kind of concern me. That tells me we probably have a lot of username and passwords going on. And some of the newer authenticators, that's great. That means that some people are adopting the newer technologies, which we're going to talk about in a moment. So this is good. So if you're in that first bucket, I would say we can do better. If you're in the second bucket, I would say, wow, we really need to fix it. And the third bucket, great, you're an adopter, and this stuff is going to have a lot of value to you as well. So let's go ahead and move on to where we are today. Well, we already knew we had something you knew and something you have. But today, we also want to look at something you are. When we look at where we've evolved in authentication, users are more savvy. They've become more tech literate. I mean, look at the millennials of today. The millennials of today, they're saying that 38%, not my statistic, it's another enterprise statistic or resource statistic, 38% of millennials today don't even have a computer and have no plans to get one. They're using their phones and their tablets to do everything. So people are looking at better ways to authenticate. So how are we looking at it? When you hear people in the industry talk about authentication, well, fingerprint is kind of de facto when you think biometric. When you hear the word biometric, fingerprint is where it comes. So when we look at modern devices, all the Androids and the iOS devices today all have fingerprint reader capabilities. Now we can get into the technology of how they slightly differ, but we'll just agree that a fingerprint's a fingerprint just for sake of argument. The other part of this is eye. Now, eye has some really interesting takes on it. You've got retina, you've got iris, and you've got eye vein. Now, one of the things that's really interesting is that these are not very good from a usability point of view. Great security potentially, for example, a retina, but if you have a bad night's sleep and it can affect things like your blood sugars or you have a late night out drinking, those all affect your eye. And those kind of readers where we're looking at retina and we're looking at iris, I mean, if you look at the iris lock issues recently, there was a cell phone provider that had really banked a lot on using iris as a way of protecting it. And of course, the hackers within hours figured out they can take a high-res photo, put a contact lens on it, and break it. But those ones I really don't view as usable to the consumer market. When we're talking about consumers, we're talking about our clients. And I come from an IT background. The users in the field are my client. So when I look at supporting my clients, I've got to have it something usable. So iVein is probably the most promising. We look at a selfie camera nowadays, they can catch the whites of your eyes, and you have veins in your eyes that through the infrared in the camera, it can detect the patterns of your eye veins, which are actually more unique than a fingerprint. And what you end up with is the ability to capture something unique, no matter what your blood sugar is, how much you've been drinking, how much sleep you got, your vein pattern doesn't change. Veins may get larger or smaller, but the pattern doesn't change. So that has great promise. The next one is gestures. I like this one. It's fun to play with. It's not ready for prime time yet, but it's pretty cool, and I think we'll be there very shortly. The idea is that your screen says, write your name in the sky with your mobile device, and you just simply write your name with your phone. And it uses the gyro inside the phone, the accelerometer in the phone, to measure how you do things. No two people write the same way. And some people say, well, people can forge writing. They can. This is not foolproof, but it's pretty darn good. So you're going to see that more and more as time goes on. Now, voice and facial are two that you hear a lot of. The problem with voice and facial today is if you do not process it locally, that means that you're sending the data across the wire, which is another point of compromise. But as the technology is evolving, and we're starting to see it, for example, Microsoft released it in Windows 10, voice and facial, being processed locally because the processing power is there. If we look at what they're doing in the mobile devices with voice and facial, today, unfortunately, they're sending it across as a data stream. As the processing power in those mobile devices improve, and they are just exponentially getting more powerful, I think very shortly we're going to be seeing voice and facial being done inside the device itself. And I think that this is going to become a very good usable authentication method. I don't think we're there yet today, but I'm looking forward to seeing that as something viable. And I think that we're going to start getting adoption on this from users. Proximity is another really cool use case, which we also are going to be having in a very near release. But proximity by itself is not strong enough to determine much. So for example, if I come and sit down in front of my computer, I've got my registered mobile device, I sit at my computer, I hit the enter key, it determines, hey, your mobile device just walked up and it's right next to your computer, go ahead and unlock your device and log me in. That's great. If I walk away and my mobile device goes with me, then lock it and protect it. That's great. But what if I set my phone down on my desk and walk away? If I've been logged in and I left my phone there, what assurance do I have that that's still me? Where is that accountability? So there's still some things to work out with proximity, but from a lock-unlock, I think it's a great idea. It's one factor in assuring you are who you say you are, but really not the ultimate decider. So when we look at legacy authentication use cases, where we were, VPN obviously is the #1 use case, protecting things like Windows and Linux desktops, our jump servers, our bastion hosts, direct application integration, and of course the infrastructure. The one thing that they all have in common is they live inside the castle walls. Well, two problems with this. #1, you can build the castle walls as high as you want, but for every 10-foot wall, there's an 11-foot ladder. So that's a problem. #2, we don't live inside the castle walls anymore. When's the last time you looked at what your users are asking for that you actually made the decision to actually implement it in-house? We're not doing that anymore. We're looking at the disruption of Office 365, Workday, Salesforce, Box. You can name as many as you want. So, the #1 team, marketing, goes with Mercado. They're all moving outside. Everything is moving into a very open environment. A lot of companies are cloud first, these use cases don't work anymore. We have to adapt. The problem is as we look into moving, sorry, let me click forward. As we look into moving and trying to adapt these authentication methods, we're missing some very important information, which is the context around the access. And when we look at the context, we really have to move that into a risk approach. So as we start looking into authentication and access, we need to shift into more of a business-driven approach around risk. We need to start asking the question, how risky is this behavior? How risky is this access? So again, if we look at authentication, authentication is about a technical control, gain access or not. We have a single point. I'm going to get you come into a link, I'm going to challenge you, I'm going to let you in. But it's not very effective if I don't have the ability to say that John is a member of HR and he's accessing an HR application. That's very risky. But Fred is a data entry person, and Fred's access into HR is very minimal because all he's doing is going in to enter his time card. We need to get context around it. So when we move to identity assurance, we start looking at who the user is. Is he a member or she a member of a privileged group? How confident are you that that is really the person that they say they are? And based upon the risk, what level of assurance is required? And what we mean by that is, what type of challenge do they need to meet for me to let them go in? How confident am I that I'm not going to have a violation? So I already brought this up. Things don't live in the castle. We're dealing with cloud apps. We're dealing with third-party vendors. And as I said, third-party vendors, probably the biggest link when it comes to breaches in the last year. We no longer have our identities now living on-prem. We're dealing with things like Azure AD, Amazon Web Services, and these islands of identity. I already brought it up earlier. I always find it interesting. I probably should have done a poll where I ask, who do you think the biggest abuser of this rogue identities where they're signing up for rogue apps? Marketing tends to be the early adopter to cloud services. They go out and they sign up for Mercado and they sign up for this project and that project. And I don't fault them. It's a great idea. They're trying to drive the business. But you as identity professionals, as security, as CISOs, don't have visibility into that anymore. You lose those controls and create islands of identity. We need to figure out how to get some controls around that. So the biggest question is, all right, fine, I get it. You know, enough preaching to me. Where do I start? Well, the first thing I have to do is I have to start looking at context. I've got to start looking at where does the important stuff live? What are my high-risk assets? And it's kind of funny because if you ask a lot of organizations, I sit with a lot of organizations and CISOs, and I ask them, where is that valuable content? Where is medical? Where's your HIPAA data live? Where's your PII? Where's your IP? A lot of them look around the room and go, you know, we really don't know. So that's important. We've got to get control of where the things live. Once we do, we need to start aligning that to users. Who are privileged users within each of those applications? Is it specific individuals? Is it specific groups? Is it maybe this OU, this AD? We need to start getting granular and deciding who has access and what can they do with that access. It's kind of important because we need the context around it. We need to also start creating some rules around on-net, off-net, creating whitelists and blacklists. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of things to do. It's really not. But you got to start somewhere. The next thing we need to do is we need to build in automatic anomalous detection. Is it normal for people to act this way? Is it normal for people to access these resources off the network? Is it normal for people to log into a resource 5 times in a day? Is it normal for these regions of the country or these countries to gain access? And this needs to be automated. So what we need to start doing is we need to have the ability to have some intelligence around our authentication. The other piece, as I said, is the automation. It needs to learn what that behavior is. Now, I don't expect you from day one to know these patterns of behavior. But if we can turn on a machine learning engine that can turn around and say, okay, it is normal for people to access HR stuff at 3 o'clock in the morning. We've got a lot of insomniacs. That's okay. But it also needs to learn what bad guys are doing too. If I have failed authentications, that needs to weigh in as heavy or heavier than the successful authentications. So the machine learning not only has to deal with you as a user. So if you as a user on Monday morning at 9 a.m. every Monday morning, you log in, you check your email, you go into the HR system, you go in to look at production data, that's great. Does the rest of your organization do the same? And the reason I ask that is, I ask quite often is, if you log in and do the same thing from the same resource every day, should I even challenge you? Even if you're accessing intellectual property, should I challenge you? Maybe, maybe not. But we can sure do better than what we're doing now. The next attribute what I want to talk about is that consistency. One of the complaints I hear from a lot of companies that have implemented two-factor authentication is, well, I log into this resource, I get this experience. I log into this one, I get a different experience. Which one am I supposed to have? Users don't know. They call tech support, they open a trouble ticket. Trouble tickets cost money. We need to provide an intuitive, predictable experience. The users know what to expect. If they get challenged, that's what they're expecting. If they don't, they will get notified that no challenge is needed and they're sent right through. They know what's coming. They don't need to worry that something is wrong. The other thing is that we need to start expanding the ecosystem. We need to start having the ability to ingest external data and create closed loop systems. And what do I mean by that? Imagine the idea that your user ID has been logged in 10 times from 10 countries in the last 10 minutes. Well, I surely hope that the machine learning has triggered the anomalous detection and said something is wrong. It will then send that information off to a SIM, hopefully RSA NetWitness, but let's just say a SIM. That SIM then has the intelligence to say there's something wrong with that user account. What it can do is create an alert for the SIM so that your security team can actually start researching it. But instead of locking that user out, which is what you'll do today, we should be able to feed that back and create a closed loop that says, all right, John's account is probably compromised, but instead of locking John out, let's create, yes, it'll be a horrible experience for John, let's create low assurance for John until we figure this out. So guess what, John? Your experience is going to suck. You're going to get challenged at every road, every click. But you know what? At least you can still do your job. The bad guys trying to use his compromised account aren't going to get anywhere, but we're going to get great analytics around what this person is doing because we're capturing all that data to know what IP addresses they're coming from, what devices they're using, all of the information around it. The last piece to this is the users want to be able to authenticate the way they want to authenticate. Let's give them a choice. Start leveraging, hey, I own my phone, you're not paying for it, I'm not going to use my phone, fine, have a token. I have a phone, I'd rather use my fingerprint. Great, use that. Let the users select the method they want to use as long as it meets the level that you're willing to accept for the risk. So what do we need to do? We need to move from an authentication experience where a user tries to access a resource, they get challenged for that resource, they log in, and they're left alone. There's no visibility here. When we move into a concept of continuous assurance where we're continually looking at their session, a user tries to access that resource, they're looked at and evaluated around risk, and if necessary, they're challenged. But we don't leave them alone. We want to continually monitor the attributes of that user to make sure they're still in compliance. If they're not in compliance, let's deal with it. Let's log them out. Let's challenge them again. Let's start being intelligent about that user experience. Completely different from a traditional two-factor auth. So when we look at things, we want to look at things like who's the user, what device are they using, what's the reputation of that device, where are they coming from, what's their IP address, are they on the network, off? Let's geo-IP them. Are they in a country we trust or a country we don't? Physical location. We may want to say these are trusted locations. We implicitly entrust you. If you are in this building, go ahead and do your thing. The other last piece that I want to say here on the context is that session. Remember I talked about that continuous authentication. Have they already been sessionized? Do we have context around them? And has anything changed? And what we can do there is make go, no-go decisions and then appropriately challenge them based upon the risk, looking at their groups and the user specifics. And what happens is we start moving from just authentication to identity assurance. It's a complete change in what we're looking at. It's a complete change in the user experience. What's happening is we challenge appropriate, and this is not a one-size-fits-all. So if I hit a resource and it's considered risky, it may say, I know that an SMS is available to you, I know a push is available to you, but I'm not going to accept that. That doesn't meet the level of assurance I need appropriate to the level of risk. What we're changing is we're changing the question, how confident am I that the user is really who they say they are, not that they can meet a challenge. Bad guys are learning how to meet challenges, but they're not learning how to prove to me that they're really the person. So if we can take and start learning user behaviors, we can look at device, because device matters when we talk about users. We may have common devices used by multiple users. We may have a user that uses multiple devices. All of that matter when we look at their patterns. We need to weigh good and bad patterns as well. If the bad guys are attempting, let's look at those devices. If we get a bad guy that's had a success and we know that it's a bad guy, let's cut them off. Let's use some intelligence in this. Velocity must be a factor. Bad guys try to capitalize. If I've logged in, they've waited for that auth, and now that they've got that, they're going to go ahead and start doing some things. Well, the velocity has to matter. That's not my normal behavior. Let's put some roadblocks in place. If it is me, well, okay, prove it. No big deal. All right. The other piece of this is it can't be just for internal stuff. You can't have, well, this service protects our on-prem stuff. This service protects our cloud. It's got to adapt to be both on-prem and off-prem and be consistent. And ultimately, we're answering the question, are who they say they are, and can you prove that to me? And that's what we refer to as identity assurance. Now, again, these authenticators, they're not going away. That, you know, I always joke, and I know I'll get in trouble for saying it, but oh well, I hate fobs. I have one. I don't like them. Why don't I like them? I have a mobile device. I don't go anywhere without my mobile device. And I know that, you know, most of you, heck, I don't even run to the restroom without taking my mobile device with me. It's the only time I can get peace and quiet to read. I know, too much information. But I know a lot of you are laughing because you do the same. The mobile device is what we want to leverage. But the problem is that fobs are great for several reasons. Secure environments where you can't bring that mobile device. Clean rooms, manufacturing floors. There are so many reasons why the legacy authentication makes sense. Maybe we have users that don't have smartphones where phone calls or SMSs make sense. These are not going away. Soft tokens, desktop tokens, we can definitely do better. And I think you're going to see some evolution where we're doing is, of course, fingerprint, push technology. We are absolutely doing that. So for those of you who think that RSA is just the token company, I'm here to tell you we are absolutely not. We invented the soft tokens over 10 years ago. We have evolved way beyond that. So with our authentication methods, we can give you push technology, fingerprint, the iPrint ID. We use the iBane technology. We chair the FIDO Alliance. If you're not familiar with the FIDO Alliance, I encourage you to Google it. So we support the YubiKey, U2F FIDO tokens. Windows 10 Hello. So when we're talking about Windows desktops, we can do better. We can integrate directly with Windows 10 Hello. And of course, the one-time passcodes, putting a soft token into an authenticator that supports all of these authentication methods. So phone calls, SMS, those aren't going away, but users expect more. So as we move into the whole picture around identity and access management, identity assurance is only one piece. It's a critical piece. It's probably as important as any other approach that you can take to authentication or into a security platform. But if we look at security, again, 81% of the breaches were around identities. I think we need to tackle this fast, and we need to go after it hard. But identity is only as good as governance around that identity. Do I have visibility in who that user is, what can they access, and what are their rights within that? If I brought up the idea of a person that's a member of HR, I need to know that. What other services can that person access? And again, it's not one size fits all. If I'm an HR person going into HR, that's high risk. If I'm an HR person going into, I don't know, the financial systems, probably low risk. I don't have a lot of rights in there. That has to be dynamic. But governance needs to give me the view into knowing that. That also gives me the ability, as I said, to prioritize the risk and put context around it. The third piece of this is automating the life cycle. Most companies are pretty good at onboarding. As a person comes onto the company, they give them a lot of services. The problem is what they typically do is they say, okay, Johnny's coming on board, he's replacing Sally. Well, what they do is they say, well, just give him everything Sally had. The problem is without this governance and visibility into it, what they don't know is Sally's been at the company for 15 years, and during that time she had 8 jobs, and she was privileged in 3 of those other jobs, and they never took those rights away. So all of a sudden, the new guy coming in has rights he shouldn't have. So we need to automate the process where the joiners get on, which we do pretty good at. The movers, which we do very poorly at in the workplace, we need to automate that. We need to get better. As people move within a company, take away rights they don't need anymore and only give them the rights they need. The least rights model is appropriate. And then as they leave, let's make sure we get them off all the resources they had. If we don't have any governance, if we don't know what access they had, we end up with a lot of orphaned accounts. And it's kind of funny, we do a lot of reviews where we go in and do governance reviews. And we find so many orphan accounts. And these orphan accounts, well, a lot of people say, oh, that's no big deal. How many of you are using things like SAP and cloud services where you pay per user? And these users no longer exist anymore. That's a lot of money you're paying you don't need. So governance reviews really do pay for themselves. So when we look at the RSA Secure ID suite, so Secure ID has been around for 35 years. The suite includes the new Secure ID Access branding, which happened about a year ago, which includes everything I've been talking about. It also includes the full governance piece, and it gives you the life cycle. So the entire suite gives you the ability to get full visibility into risk. It deals with joiners, movers, and leavers, and of course, access and authentication. I'm really here to talk about authentication, of course, but you have to understand what we are all about in our identity suite. We're more than just the token. So a lot of people don't really know a lot about what RSA is. So I'm going to take 2 seconds here and kind of go through our different practices. So we have our NetWitness suite, which is our SIM product, which gives us full packet capture, where we take packets, logs, flow data, create correlation engines in there, and give you true finding that needle in the haystack. It's really, really robust and gives you that great view into your network. We have, of course, the security suite, which we've been talking about. We have our Archer, our governance, risk, and compliance. It's all about risk. Our anti-fraud team. Most of you use this product every day and didn't even know it. If you do online banking, there's a pretty good chance you've been using the RSA Fraud Risk Intelligence, a product called Adaptive Authentication, which is where we get our intelligence. We've got over 15 years of learning about risk engines. We've been doing this a long time through our anti-fraud group. And the last group is our cyber defense team, our cyber practice, where if you had a breach, and maybe you don't know this, if any of you have ever experienced a breach, you know time matters. And so we have a team that will parachute out of the sky and at a moment's notice come in and help you with that breach. My last slide, and then we'll get into some Q&As. If you didn't know this, we have a conference coming up in October called Charge, where this is really about your peers. Your peers submit papers and reviews, and they're going to come in and talk about their identity practice, what they've had successes, where they've had failures, and what they've done to go through it. So this is really a great time for you to come and meet your peers and understand what's going on. So at this point, we're ready for some Q&A. And Mike, I'm going to open up to you to see what kind of questions people have.
Yeah, excellent. Awesome. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that presentation. Some cool stuff. It's interesting to see some of the future of authentication, and it's interesting stuff. So we do have a number of questions, but if anyone has more questions, you can type them into the Q&A box located at the bottom of the browser window, and we'll get to as many as we can. Okay, so I'll take this first one here, and the question is, when you talk about flexible authentication, does RSA provide a push authentication to the user's smartphone? Can you talk about the process of the RSA using smartphone?
Yeah, so one of the things that I talked about. I'm sorry?
So I think there's a little bit of a lag there. When they said push, I'm assuming maybe they mean an SMS or something.
Well, no, I think what they mean is, if you look at our modern authenticators, which we have today, so the answer to the question is absolutely we do push. The push technology is different than an SMS, and I get that's a common question, so I might as well address it. So an SMS uses a technology that was built a very long time ago. I actually did a white paper and a blog on this and how weak SMS is, but the bottom line is an SMS is a one-way signal that we use a methodology to send a message to your phone that can be intercepted at many different points. A push technology is an end-to-end data connection. So if I'm a user and I'm logging into a resource, I type my username and my password, or I just simply click. What happens is the data channel is established between the authentication engine and my mobile device. And typically they use PIN certificates. So that means that there can't be any redirect in there. And establishes a data connection between my mobile device and the authentication engine that has me approve or deny. So absolutely we do that. The difference in our approach than the other vendors is the intelligence around the auth method. So while we'll say we'll do a push, does it meet the risk associated for the resource and the user in the context? So what do I mean by that? If the risk is low, meaning I'm a user, I'm logging into my email, I'm off the network, or I'm at home and it's common for me to log in from home, maybe that push is good enough. So I log in, username, password, enter, my phone goes beep, says, are you logging into email? Yes, I am. Or my watch. Yes, I am. That's great. Great user experience. But what if that user is doing it from China? Well, maybe that's not good enough. So leveraging that push technology, but the identity assurance behind it that says, you know what, push isn't good enough. I want a fingerprint or I want an eye print. Which do you prefer? And let you choose which one you like. And oh, by the way, we're going to remember which one you like, so that the next time you have to meet that level of challenge, that's what we're going to give you by default. So great question. Yes, we absolutely do push. Not only do we do push for resources, but we can also do push for VPN. That's something that I hear a lot. People say, well, when are you going to do something about your VPN access? We do that already. So if we have a user that's logging into their using AnyConnect or logging in using any of their SSL VPN, whatever, you can absolutely username, password, phone go beep. Yep, I'm logging onto the VPN using that push. Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, thanks for the clarification. And I think even earlier this year, I believe NIST recommended, the kind of the deprecation of SMS-based two-factor authentication as well.
So yeah,
Obviously.
yeah, that's a great topic. So NIST did put out a guideline, and they actually backtracked a little. So they put out a first one that said SMS bad. We got with them and sat down and talked about it, and SMS inherently has some weaknesses, but if the risk is low, why not? So if you read, if any of you want to, we probably should have put the link there. If you Google NIST 800-63, you'll find that they created a new document which specifically calls out identity assurance and context being relevant to the authentication method. So they backpedaled on that as long as context is part of the authentication. So I encourage you, if you guys have some time to read, it's a tough read, by the way, but it's NIST 800-63, which talks specifically about it. First couple pages, really good. After that, it gets pretty detailed.
Okay, excellent. But this is an interesting one, and this could fuel a discussion on policy more than anything. But this person, I believe, is based in France, and the question is: biometric usage might be limited by local data protection laws. Are we limited to traditional two-factor authentication in that case?
That is a really good question. No, I deal with this quite a bit. That's actually a really good question. So whoever asked that, thank you for asking it. So one of the things that's really interesting is different regions. So you've got the GDPR that's really important. You've got all these new regulations that are coming out around identities. So GDPR is all about identity. It's all about what you do with that identity, how you store that identity, providing opt-out. And it also talks about collection capabilities around it. So fingerprint is very important. iPrint is important. But what's important to understand is, where is that data stored? So in France, they have some rules around storing and capturing individuals' information. But if we leverage the mobile device and we say we want to do an authentication, your option is fingerprint, and we leverage the mobile device to say you're going to do the fingerprint, don't transmit that across the wire, I believe that fully complies with the regulations. Now, where that doesn't comply, as I said, is where the idea of using face and voice to transmit across the wire, I think you have a problem. But if I can go and tell your mobile device, give me an auth, and I want either a fingerprint or an iPrint, and do it on the mobile device, I think we're fully in compliance.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, we've got a bunch of questions here. So, okay, this is another fun one. This one is: when it comes to authentication via biometrics, are there any methods which combine them, such as requiring eye, voice, and fingerprint at the same time?
Absolutely. So one of the things we talked about is risk. So when we build our policies, we give you the ability to build rules around levels of risk. So if you view something as high risk, say, for example, and I'm sorry for picking on China because I have coworkers there, so I pick on them too. But if I'm in China and my operations are here in the U.S., I may make a decision that, sorry, this resource is not accessible. Or I may say, while I'm going to give you this resource, you have to meet a higher level of assurance, so you're going to chain these methods available. So I may give you a policy that says, okay, a fingerprint and an iPrint. Or if you're going to give me a fingerprint, I'll accept a fingerprint, a FIDO token, and, I don't know, a one-time passcode. You can create policies that says you can chain these to make it higher. And the one that I think I like the most is increasing the number of authentication methods with the idea of a fingerprint and a FIDO token. So that's no longer two-factor. That truly becomes multi-factor. Not only do I got to know my username and my password, I've got to have the registered mobile device with my fingerprint, and I've got to have another physical device. You can get that crazy if you want. We fully support it.
Okay, excellent. And can you do multi-levels of access? So, for example, if you forgot your token, but you have your phone, and okay, maybe I can get onto the VPN and get my email, but I can't get access to the sales data. Are there different levels, or is it kind of a single sign-on, all or nothing?
No, it's a great questions. The context matters. So let's say, for example, I have access to 100 applications. Each application is going to have a different level of risk based on my context, based on where I am, who I am, what my roles are. Every application presents a different level of risk. So based upon the levels I can meet is what I have access to. If, for example, I left my token behind and I have my phone and some of the security policies say, you know, you got to have a token or you can't get in, well, I can get into the ones that I can meet the level, but the ones I can't, I simply can't. That's just the way it is. Now, can you create emergency access for that user? Of course you can, but that would require human involvement to allow you to bypass security one at a time, and it's only for that session. So you have to build in for emergencies. But absolutely, this is a tiered approach where you can say level of access. And the cool thing about this is whether you already have a single sign-on product today using Ping, Okta, whatever, we fully integrate with them. If you don't have a single sign-on, guess what? We include it. So single sign-on is critical for this to work, but we want to get and we need to get the visibility into that entire session.
Okay, excellent. Fun, fun, fun. Okay, and another kind of context-based question, and the question is, do you look at IP reputation of the user and or domains that a process is trying to access?
Yes, we do. So I use this example quite often, and this is exactly to that. Let's say, for example, that you, on every Friday night on your way home, you stop at Starbucks. And because you know the minute you walk in the house, you're going to get it. The kids are going to be all over you. The honeydews are going to come out. So every Friday you stop at Starbucks, you log in, grab your coffee, and you spend half an hour just reading your emails and just closing things out for the week. That IP address and the authentication you used, the access you had, the level of assurance you met, all goes into that engine. So as you do that, it's learning that location around the IP address, the geo. All the attributes around that location are being learned by the engine. So now I stop at that Starbucks on a Friday afternoon or a Thursday afternoon and log in. The risk associated to me based on the reputation of your access, the risk is lowered because of the assurance level. Now, it's not going to be eliminated. But over time, that dynamically becomes a trusted IP and a trusted location. The engine learns. But just as fast as it can learn, it can be even quicker unlearned. If a bad guy attempts to log in and gets fails, well, that undid everything I just did to create a trust. The untrust comes up. I've got to be proven again. So as bad guys try to capitalize on that, it definitely reduces the reputation of that location. So IP address, location through geo IP, all of that are factors in that dynamic engine.
Okay, excellent. And you talked a little bit on this topic, you talked about the various methods of authentication and some of the ones that are currently, I guess, in progress or in development. The question is, are some authentication methods more secure than others, and how would you rank kind of them overall?
Yeah, I think I would personally kind of rank them in an idea of low, medium, and high. So, you know, if we look at low, SMS, of course, I would call that low. Phone call, probably low. Push technology, probably low. FIDO token, low or medium by itself because that's a bring your own identity. You register it. So that's, you know, but it's a physical device. We tend to leave our keys laying around and that's on it. When we start looking at things like fingerprints and eye prints, those would go towards the medium or the high. But as somebody brought up, if I really want high, I'm going to chain. And I'm going to chain non-type devices. So the idea of a fingerprint and a FIDO token, an eye print and a FIDO token, or a physical token, chaining devices. Secure ID tokens, the fobs themselves, definitely high because of the design and the architecture. So each one of them has their own weight. Now, Windows 10 Hello, it's in the desktop. I would say that's probably low. As we get Windows 10 Hello into the, believe it or not, I said it, it's voice and facial in Windows 10 Hello. If you start leveraging those, any one by themselves, probably not high, probably low. But if I chain them together, if I log in through Windows 10 Hello and use the voice and the facial together, I could probably get myself to a medium. I would never call that a high. But you can chain them to create levels. And that's what's cool about the system. You can drag and drop and link together to create your low, medium, and high.
Excellent. Okay. All right, we've got a bunch more here. Let me scroll through these. Okay, question on product. Is there a cloud-based offering, or does this have to be on-prem? Or do you offer something to get away from Active Directory altogether?
All right, well, let's address those as two separate things. Number one, we offer a cloud version. Absolutely. We offer a hybrid version. So we don't go full on-prem with this because you're typically not a full on-prem. Everything is no longer living inside the castle. We can't be full on-prem because the auth engine has to talk to your mobile device, and that has to be done through the cloud. So it's a hybrid approach. Most of our clients have adopted the hybrid approach where you have a small VM that lives in your network, typically in the DMZ, that has the policies and the engines. That's your primary decision point that's making all those decisions. And then it leverages the cloud to go out and talk and do the push to your devices. That's the hybrid. It is possible. We have a version that lives 100% cloud, and that is when we start looking, you talked about the directories, is if you're moving into a cloud using Azure AD, well, why have anything on-prem to do that when everything lives in the cloud? Why not go to a cloud-only approach, which we absolutely endorse? So we can live with both. There does need to be an identity store. There has to be an authoritative source. So the authoritative source needs to be some form of identity store, whether it's OpenLDAP, OpenDJ, a virtual directory, Active Directory, Azure AD. We've got to have something as the authoritative source, and we'll take advantage of it. But I would say almost everybody's got to have, you got to have that.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and this is more of an action item, I guess. And this person is wondering, what are some simple steps I can take to work towards an identity assurance strategy at my organization? What's the first step?
Well, so the first step, I think, is if you're already a Secure ID customer and you have our enterprise license, you're already licensed for some of this already. Wow, that was redundant. You already have a license enabling to use our basic authentication if you're an enterprise customer already. If you're a Secure ID customer and you have the base license, upgrade to enterprise. It's not a lot, but it gets you the basic identity assurance, and you can start using some of these modern authenticators. It's baby steps. I would never say rip and replace. I would never say jump all in. These are baby steps. One common question we get is, well, we have Secure ID. I mean, we have over 25,000 customers using this product today. So we have a lot of people using this product, 50 to 60 million authenticators out there. So I have to assume a lot of you already have it. So what I would say to you is if you already have Secure ID, make sure you're on enterprise. And if you are, you're licensed for basic identity assurance. Go ahead and spin up the VM. Play with it. Pick an application. O365, Salesforce, something that's commonly used, and put some basic policies and rules around it and start creating a better user experience. Start creating some levels of assurance on the user around risk, around static policies, and then add on as you go. This is not a jump in, I want everything tomorrow. This is what's my high risk, where's my greatest risk, start there, and then slowly add on applications from there.
Okay, excellent. And an issue more, I guess, would be a reactive issue. The question is the best way to handle, can biometrics be compromised, and, what's the process to handle that if they are?
Well, I think it depends upon the question around compromise. So one of the funny things I get is, well, how good is the fingerprint on your mobile phone? Well, let's be honest. Anybody can register any finger on a mobile phone because I don't have access to knowing your phone. And the common thing I get is, well, how do I know if it's my kid's thumbprint or my thumbprint? Well, you don't. You have the control of your mobile device. You're registering the fingerprints. You probably should have a password protection on your mobile device, and don't let your kid, your spouse, your partner, whatever, don't let them register their fingerprints into your mobile device, number one. Number two, when you look at how things can be compromised, you have to look at the authentication method and the risk associated to it. So if I'm talking about a low risk, the compromise hopefully had minimal impact. As I get to high risk, and I talked about chaining, actually I didn't, somebody else brought it up, which was kind of cool. The idea of chaining authenticators for high risk stuff is a really good idea. So even if my biometric, my fingerprint got compromised, but if another factor is required to achieve that level, then you know what? I think that's a great idea. Now, one thing that's very important around this is you can create a horrible user experience. If you create a horrible user experience, your users are going to try to complain, get it taken out, or they're going to try to find ways around it. If I can create a user experience where, yes, the first time, for example, I'm an engineer and I'm going in to work with the secret sauce, then yes, the first time I go in, I'm going to hate it because I got to give a fingerprint and then I got to put in the USB token and I got to push the little button using FIDO. Great. But if I can put it in such that once I've met that high level of assurance with that continuous authentication, then as I move around within the organization to different applications, and I've already met that level of assurance, and as long as I've been sessionized and nothing changes, no command and control, no man in the middle, no browser in the middle, because we're looking for that, then why not let the user continuously do their job and not challenge them again? Only challenge them when they need to. So hopefully that made sense.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like, Jim, we're coming up on the top of the hour here. So on behalf of Security Week, I want to first of all, thank RSA and thank you, Jim, for your presentation today. And thank all of you who took the time out of your busy schedules to join us for this hour. We hope you found it informational. But I'll leave it up to you, Jim, to say any closing words, and we will conclude today's webcast.
Yeah, there are some documents there in the resources. The Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, great read. I really encourage you to read it. There's some additional information on Secure ID access there. We've got a couple white papers and an ebook. Some good reads. I encourage you to take a look at it. And I would say get in touch with your RSA account manager, and maybe if you want to see it, get a demo, get some more information. I think you'd be pretty pleased with what you see.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks, everybody, and we hope you all have a great day.